quite a long time. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Although I don't know if I should say a warm welcome, it's very hot outside, so I think it's lucky we're all sitting in here. My name is Shailaja Bajpai. I'm an advisor to the School of Department of Journalism, Media and Communication at IILM University. And I'm also an editorial advisor to the print.in, which is a website, a news website. It's only a website, right? Some of you might have had occasion to see Shekhar Gupta on it in the CTC. I can see some people nodding their heads. Well, that's the one. Okay, so we are here today, and I'm delighted actually to be in the company of these five accomplished journalists. And what makes me even happier actually is that they're all so young. You know, normally you will find that at these kind of discussions, all gray-haired people who think because of the gray we are very wise, sit up here and talk to them, right? And more often than not, talk down to them a little. So it makes me so happy that today there's a role reversal and we are going to listen to them. And the reason we're going to listen to them is really twofold. First of all, of course, they're young. Two, they're women, and this whole thing is about women in Delhi. But lastly, and perhaps more importantly, they're very accomplished young journalists. And they have just recently, 5 of them and 2 others who are not with us because they're men, and we couldn't have them up here. Otherwise, I would have been delighted to welcome them too. Won a very prestigious international award called the International Press Institute Award for Excellence in Journalism. And they just received it, what was it, in March? Oh, February they received it. So 7 journalists from the print. Yeah, it would be nice. Because I don't think mostly young people receive these awards. And they all received it for the print's coverage of the coronavirus in 2020, is it?
21.
21, I beg your pardon, 21. So that's, and the other thing is what I think is interesting about them, so they're going to tell you a little bit about those stories. And I think you need to understand that they were part of a much larger framework that the print tried to fill with stories and people going out into the heartland. That is to say that these children did not, I call them children, these accomplished reporters, I beg your pardons, didn't sit in Delhi and just use the phone to get the stories. They have traveled across India, literally from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, right? From the northeast to Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, you name it. In fact, I think we did, the print sent out these young reporters on 55 separate trips covering 150 days. I don't think there is any other newspaper or media organization that sent out as many people as we did. And what's important is that they were all so young and not the veterans. They were all inexperienced. Most of them, as they will tell you, were on their first jobs, right? But they went out when at the time, and do remember 2020, 21, we all were not sure what the coronavirus was. They put their hands up, they got into the cars, and they went. So I'm going to ask them a little bit about their experiences and to tell you something about the stories that won them those awards, right? I know now, mercifully, we've all got over COVID, and I think I must be the only person in Delhi who still carries a mask, but otherwise, it was, as you all know, a very desperate time, and none of us wanted to go anywhere. We didn't want to move out of our homes or rooms, let alone be traveling through India, right? Reporting, going to hospitals, and what have you. The second thing I'll ask them to speak about is really because most of them, I don't think any of you really belong to Delhi, right?
No.
But they've all come to Delhi and they're all living here as young professional women. So what's it like to be a young professional woman in Delhi is something else I thought that might be of interest. So thank you very much. And now let me introduce them. I completely forgot. Okay. To my right is Jyoti Yadav, Principal Correspondent, The Print. Soniya Agarwal, Senior Correspondent at The Print. Manisha, Mondal, Senior Photojournalist. And I want to tell you something very unusual. 3 photojournalists, 1 at The Print. right? That is very unusual. Normally, these don't go to photojournalists, and everyone just takes photos off the net, right? But we are one place that we did have them, and more importantly, they won, right? So they were recognized. So the visual arts, and in this case, journalism, was recognized. I think that's a great honor to them. Fatima Khan, who was with the print, but now is senior correspondent at the Quint, which is another news portal. Aneesha Bedi, who is a freelance, was also with us, but now is a freelance journalist and a consultant with WHO Southeast Asia. Welcome once again, and thank you very much for your patience. Okay, so shall we begin, Jyoti, with you? Where is Jyoti?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting, it's very difficult, it's 360 degrees. Jyoti, let's begin with you. First, tell us a little bit about yourself, just where you've come from, etc. And then, can you tell us about that wonderful story you wrote about Vinay Srivastav?
Yes.
And teachers, again, from UP, who were forced to do poll duty during the COVID, and I think how one tragically died.
Yes.
Okay, all yours.
Hi, hello everyone. I come from a village in Haryana. I was born and brought up in Haryana, and I came to Delhi University for my higher education, and I've stayed in Delhi for my after 2011. I'll start with my award-winning story. I worked on a story which was one of the biggest breaking news of the second COVID wave. I was in Lucknow and everybody was dying. A dead body was arriving every 5 minutes in the crematoriums. I called my editor. I was sent for a political story. I was there to cover a political profile of Mahilayen Singh Yadav. And then there were dead bodies all around me. So I alerted my editor. I asked him, okay, can I file this story? So he was like, but where is the data? How are we going to say that every 10 minutes a dead body is arriving? So there was no way to tell this story, but there was a panic all around us from all over India. So my editor asked me, okay, go to the crematoriums and count the dead bodies and then file the story. So I went to the crematoriums, I counted the dead bodies for 3 days, and we published the first breaking news of the second COVID wave, the undercounting of COVID deaths. So this was my first story, and the story was followed by not just national media, the leading newspapers, TV channels, but also the international media houses. That includes Reuters, AFP, CNN, and everybody else. So this was my first story, but it was very difficult to be on the ground. I was wearing 2 layers of, in fact 3 layers of masks in the month of April, and I was going from one crematorium to another to bring this story. So this was the first story I did, and the second story was about the oxygen crisis in Lucknow. And these were not just the stories of people from UP. I think these stories represent a large story about the second COVID wave. So this person was a veteran journalist in Lucknow, and his son, who was a banker at that time, he was standing outside the CMO's office, Chief Medical Officer. Around that time, nobody from the administration was speaking to journalists. So I was running from one office to another, and I found him standing outside the CMO's office. And he thought that because his father was a journalist and he saw me asking questions to the people who were coming, who were crying for help. So he approached me that my father is not on ventilator because he was not getting a hospital bed. He was being treated inside his house. So he asked me to help him out. So what I did was, because Twitter was the only medium where we could actually tell our India's COVID story. So everybody was tweeting and asking for help. I realized that Twitter may help him. I asked him to tweet about his father's condition and also tag the chief minister and his advisors and also me. So I amplified his tweet, and then I followed his father's story. I went to 5 to 6 hospitals asking for a bed, but he died in the evening. I think that was the 6th hospital that I went, and I was in the line. and I received a message that my father is no longer. And that story was the defining story of second COVID wave. Again, it was followed by national and international media. And the third story, for which I think I took 1 or 2 days, I cried my heart out. I couldn't write the intro of that story because it shook me from, like, I was, my editors or everybody in journalism, they say that journalists should not get attached to their subjects. But the second COVID wave was extraordinary, and there was no way that you cannot get attached to these subjects. They were real human beings, and it felt like some of my people are dying. So the story of 8 months pregnant Kalyani Agarwal from Jaunpur, and she was forced to do a poll duty during the second COVID wave. She was begging the district officials not to deploy her at the polling station. But the administration threatened her with an FIR. And she had to travel miles to reach that polling station, and she died a week later. She also didn't get a bed in the hospital, and she died. And after my story, I think Allahabad High Court, they took a cognizance, and the teachers and their families who were too scared to talk to the media initially during the second COVID wave, they thought that they would be threatened with FIRs, and so they were not speaking to the media. A year later, the Allahabad High Court asked the state government, UP government, to give compensation. I think they have received 30 lakh rupees. More than 1,200 families received 30 lakh rupees and a fourth grade government job. So that was the impact of my story, but it was one of the toughest story that I have ever done.
You know, this is quite common, and I think all of them will tell you at one stage or another that it really did take a toll on all of them. First of all, they are still very young, right? They're as young as maybe some of the students, just a little older than some of the students I see here. Hi, guys. So for them, it was, imagine having to see death like that at such close quarters at such a young age. And I think Manisha has particularly talked to me about this, of how we don't think about the mental health of especially the women who've been impacted by this, and it's something worth thinking about. Sonia, can I come to you now? You're also not from Delhi, you're from Gujarat, right? And you came. So just tell us a little bit about that. And hers was a more curious story about how deaths were being passed off as death by illness, COVID deaths. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us about the story.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sonia, as ma'am has already introduced. So I'm from Ahmedabad, and the two stories that were a part of the bigger list of stories that won the award were both from Ahmedabad. So it seems like my hometown is my karma bhumi. But I think I kind of echo Jyoti's sentiment, because deaths were being underreported in Gujarat as well on a very, very massive scale. And there was no other way to find out how the state and the district administration was doing it, other than actually going to the crematoriums and the Shamshan Ghats and the burial grounds. So I think I had Praveen Jain with me. He's a very senior photojournalist. And the both of us, over 2 days, visited, I think, the 6 biggest crematoriums of Ahmedabad, 6 to 8, and 3 burial grounds, the burial grounds where the Muslims bury their dead. And we counted all the dead bodies. And the thing is that specific instructions were given by the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation to the workers of the crematoriums to not let journalists in. They were restricted from showing us their books where they were writing, about the people who they were burning or burying. And it took a lot of convincing, a lot of, backdoor entry into the office and requesting them to let us see it. And they were like, please don't name us or we'll lose our jobs. We are at risk, but we are here because we don't want to lose the roof over our heads. The thing is that Sadly, and of course, what the district administration was doing was, uh, they were listing the resulting illness from COVID as the cause of death. So it was done very systematically in order to show that there's not enough COVID deaths in the city. So if somebody is a heart patient, gets COVID, and dies because of heart issues or any other resulting illness, that illness was written as the cause of death and not COVID in the death certificates. And all the family members that we met there were really upset with it. They were like, right, COVID, they're dying from COVID, they're not dying from a heart attack. I mean, some of the people had to burn their own dead because there were not enough workers in the crematoriums to actually, bring those piles of wood. And then I think there's a ritual where they break the skull after the body is burnt. So in order to do that, they had to remove the ashes themselves. And these are people who've been waiting for 7-8 hours in the queue just to, get a turn to get a spot in the crematorium to burn the dead. So it was quite harrowing for them. It was harrowing for me because I am from that city. I grew up there. I spent 23 years of my life there. And to see people, I mean, some of them were people that I knew. So it was extremely difficult. I mean, I needed like a good 24 hours to process the whole story and to, process the level of destruction that I was seeing in front of me and the kind of apathy that I saw from the district administration. And of course, the situation was no different there from what it was in UP or any other state at the time. There were not enough beds, there were not enough oxygen cylinders available. Sadly, my story, of course, it was followed up by several other publications, but sadly, the kind of impact that one would want did not happen.
Yeah, I think, it's very difficult when there were so many stories coming out simultaneously about how terrible things were. We should recall that, the administration was also under tremendous pressure. Right? It wasn't that it was always, so organized that there was some kind of big plan to hide everything. It was just also that they could not cope with the enormity of what had happened and also the ignorance about it, right? And it was not just in Ahmedabad, everywhere we know that people with COVID, it was always, my uncle died of COVID and he was not shown as a COVID death either, and that was in Delhi and was just shown as whatever he died of. He had a stomach infection. So, I think that was the norm. If I can come to Fatima, whose story is a little more curious and has nothing to do with death, right? Yes. Thank God. Let's move along. Fatima, yes. Something curious about marriages.
So, we'd been on the field, me and Nirmal, who was a photographer at the print as well, and both of us had been on the field in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh for about over a month, and I think all of us reached a point of saturation, not just mentally, emotionally, physical tiredness, but also in terms of hunting for stories. Usually what happens in assignments is, okay, this is a crime story, you go, you speak to all the stakeholders, you come back with a story. But in an open-ended assignment like this, you have to go and luckily for us, our editors are just like giving us a free rein, go, travel, look for stories. But what that also means is that you want every story to highlight something new, something that hasn't already been discussed at length. And what I like to do, and I think a lot of journalists like to do, is you enter a new city and you're like, okay, let me speak to these men sitting under this tree or these women in this shop, or, and you kind of just pick up the ethos of the place, the city, the culture from these conversations. But when there's a lockdown, it's deserted. The cities are completely deserted. There's no one to speak to. It's a brand new place. I'd never been to Madhya Pradesh before that, and we've traveled through like 7-8 districts already. We hit a new district. What do we do now? And the one group of people who were active throughout, of course, besides the doctors and the administrations, people who were on the ground working 24/7 during both waves of the COVID, were the Anganwadi workers and the ASHA workers, without whom I believe the last mile connectivity, whether be it of vaccines or just basic COVID social awareness, would have been impossible. So I was like, okay, hey, let me go and hit them up and have a conversation with them. and we're talking about the deaths, just how gory everything has been. And then they say, oh, you know, for the last month or so, we've also been very busy because we have to go and stop child marriages. And I'm like, hey, what's that about? What are you talking about? And they say, you know, since there's then a lockdown has been announced, suddenly we are seeing a huge spike in child marriages. And Anganwadi workers, their job is to, you know, for whatever specific area they're allocated, they have to go and stop these child marriages because they're illegal. And I said, why do you think this spike is? And they weren't really sure of the reason. They're just like, oh no, we just go and stop them. But we have seen these numbers spike. And I was like, okay, you know what? Take me to one of these homes. And I understand that they might be scared and worried to speak about it because it is an illegal act. But it is something that has really piqued my curiosity. So and I go and I speak to multiple homes, girls 15, 16, 17, and you know, their parents were ready to get them married, and I speak to the girls and I'm like, okay, I just want some time alone with the girl, and then I'll speak to the parents. And inevitably in say 9 out of 10 of those cases, all these young girls, they were actually very willing and very happy to get married. And I said, why is that? You know, don't you? One of them actually was getting married on the day her pre-boards were scheduled, which didn't obviously happen because of the lockdown. And I said, why were you so happy? And she said, you know, because in a lockdown, if I get married or if I have my wedding in a lockdown, my parents won't have to invite all the people that we'd otherwise do. They won't have to pay up to the caterers, the pandits, all the people that we invite, the tent wala. All of these expenses will get cut short, and it will be a simple wedding, and that means lesser burden for my parents. And she said that I felt like this was the responsible thing to do. And you know, all these young girls just so mature beyond their years, unfortunately. You know, it shouldn't have to be this way, but that's how it was. I also met some who, you know, incidentally, a lot of festivals at that time, there's something called Akshaya Tritiya in the Hindu festival where, you know, it's apparently supposed to be a really good day to get married. That happened to just clash with the peak of the lockdown. And there was also one other reason which actually just made me so sad. It was that, you know, the parents were like, we don't know how much longer we live. Everyone around us is dying. There's death everywhere. So if we die, who will get this child of mine married? So all of these reasons combined led to this spike in child marriages, and it was just really sad to see. But you know, it's one of those unintended consequences of a policy or a law or a government decision that no one can really foresee. But which is why I feel like it's our job as journalists to hit the ground and figure out and dig out these stories. And of course, the administration at that time, kudos to them though, that they were really active in stopping these marriages. But I remember when that story went up, I did get a few comments saying, oh, these girls, why are they so happy talking about it? It's sheer ignorance, you know. And I said, no, that's extremely judgmental. And, you know, as journalists, we can't be judgmental of our subjects, regardless who they are. But here especially, these are extremely vulnerable people. They're doing the best they can in the circumstances they have found themselves in. Most of them don't have a roof over their heads like I do, sitting in the national capital. So, you know, those kind of little nuances come out when you're out on the field like this.
Thank you, Fatima. Okay, now I think it's time to come back to Delhi. We've traveled around India a bit much. And that takes me to Aneesha, who actually, her story is from Delhi. And it's about something all of us were also very know well about. It was about the oxygen crisis, right, which took place everywhere. We were all looking around and wondering whether we should keep oxygen at home for our elderly people or for ourselves. Aneesha, over to you. This was political, right?
That's right. Thank you so much. So my story was actually on the oxygen crisis, that dominated the national capital. I'm sure most of you, as Shailaja said, perhaps experienced this firsthand. But what I do want to begin with, and I remember telling Shailaja this when we won the award and she interviewed us for a piece that she was doing, that I actually think this was my least difficult story. This is a story that came to me while I had COVID. So I find that very interesting and ironical at the same time, because we traveled, across the country. I was in Telangana for a month and then in Rajasthan. And so I fell sick, and it got to a point where my editor, Shekhar, was kind enough to say that, get back home, Aneesha, and it's fine. So my driver and myself, we drove down from Kota in Rajasthan to Chandigarh. The minister was kind enough to let us cross the borders, and we had our masks. And also, I think my driver and I were aware that both of us had got infected. I mean, we tested positive, so we were both like, "Theek hai, ab dono ko hai, it's fine." But I think we need to be in our homes right now. And I was sent to Chandigarh, which is my hometown. And because my parents are aged, with the grace of God, we had 2 floors. So I made sure that there's no exposure, and I was sent right upstairs. And the reason I go into this detail is that physically there was no strength, but I think emotionally there was this, and my editors were kind enough to say that, Aneesha, you can stay put, take rest. If you have something, you can file, because I think a lot of us here, even though we had, got infected, we somehow didn't want to, I think our brains were working in a way that we didn't want to stop thinking of stories despite what it had done to our physical as well as emotional health. And I remember, I think this was the first night that I got back home, and my brain couldn't be put to rest because I was like, okay, what's the next piece? What's happening? Okay, I can't, there was this constant guilt of, okay, I need to tell more. There's just too much happening, and how can we not be telling stories constantly? And because I used to cover the national capital and the political parties here for the print back then, a lot of information used to keep coming to me from my sources, and also I think firsthand just experiencing, because thanks to the kind of access that I think a lot of us had, we would keep getting SOS calls no matter which part of the country we were in. And this is close to May 2021, which is when we were hearing a lot about these trucks that were, where there wasn't enough oxygen, and there was some on the border in Haryana. So there was this whole tussle going on between the central government as well as the Aam Aadmi government in Delhi in terms of what's going wrong and why aren't we being able to arrange enough oxygen in hospitals or have enough cylinders. So this was actually, I think I again want to reiterate what Fatima said. It was one of those stories that just came to me while you keep having these conversations. You're not actively looking, but you're just alert to what's happening around you. So I remember that I was in touch with a lot of stakeholders, administrative staff, and that's when I realized that, okay, there was actually supposed to be a panel that was constituted by the Supreme Court to look into this entire oxygen crisis. But what actually came of it? Were the members actually doing something about it or not? Until, your conversations made you come to the conclusion that that was lying dormant, and sadly so at a point when we needed it the most. So I think that was one of the stories. Similarly, I think there was also a larger calculation method that both the governments, the state government as well as the central government, were using to calculate what's the kind of requirement of oxygen in different states as well as Delhi. And how apparently the basis of that particular calculation was mistaken was another story that I kind of came to when we drew a graphic. And I remember finding it very tough because numbers is not something I'm really fond of, but we kind of came to that conclusion, and I think that was one of the stories that made it to the list. But yeah, I think, the story was filed when we were down with COVID, but I think that's most of us.
I think most journalists, especially at the print, did get COVID. And ironically, in some cases, they got it after they came back, right? Sitting in Delhi, rather than being on the job and getting it. Okay, which brings us to Manisha, the photojournalist amongst us. I'm so sorry that, it wasn't, the link wasn't working. I wanted to show you. She actually stood outside hospital. She stood outside everything, right? I shouldn't say just hospital. She stood at crematorium. She stood outside people's homes. She stood in hospitals, ICUs, mortuaries, you name it. She and her colleagues. And went click, click, click. And it was very sensitive because obviously people had lost their families, and the last thing they want someone to do is to take a photo of them crying. I mean, my photo is out there and I'm so embarrassed. I can't imagine what would happen if someone was, to photograph me crying. I'd be really mortified. And when I'm under tragic circumstances. So, Manisha, can you just tell us what it's like for you? You did that, what you won for. But really, what it's like for someone like you when you have to do this kind of thing. You're in someone's face and you can't say smile, right? Like we normally do for photos. But you had to do something and get them to respond. So just talk a little about it.
Hi, I am Manisha. I am from Howrah, West Bengal. I am working with the print from past 5 years. And what Shailaja mentioned about standing outside hospitals, crematoriums, it all started from, I think, 2020 Delhi riots. And it ended in, not ended, I don't know if COVID has ended yet or not, but it ended 2021, April or May, at least by then. But assignments of like funerals and these are very common for photojournalists or journalists. So if you are going to become a journalist, it's going to be a part of your routine. And so for this story, which was mentioned in the award list, I got COVID in April in 2021 in second wave, and because I stay alone in Delhi, it was very difficult to manage by myself everything. Anyway, so my friends and whoever is here, they're very supportive. But after that, when I went out, it was peak summer in May, and around like 48, 49 degrees Celsius. And I remember my duty that day was, my boss asked, just go and see whatever you can get outside. And I stood outside the LNJP mortuary. So over there, you cannot just go and stand there. The securities will just like, they'll ask you to, aap jao yahan se. And if you don't go, then you will be, there will be 4 or 5 security guards like literally chasing you away. And the last thing you can do is just stand somewhere in the corner and just observe. And that's what I did. I landed up there around 10 a.m. in the morning, and I was there till like 3 or 4 p.m. And the only thing I did was observe. The observations which I made, first was the bodies, which was like the number of bodies that were like coming and going. Coming, when I say coming, they were coming from the hospitals and going to the crematorium or the burial grounds. So, and during COVID, the mortuary was the only place where you could see your like loved ones for the last time before their bodies completely wrapped in that blue plastic bag or whatever. And over there, what happened, I didn't mean to file any story on that, but my boss, I tweeted out 2 pictures I clicked that day. One picture was of this girl who was crying by, like, she had kept her head on the scooter's back seat and she was crying. And another was of a woman holding a hand of her like sister's son. So these 2 photos I tweeted out saying like 2 women, one woman who was crying, like who kept her head on the seat, she lost her sister that day to COVID. And the woman who was holding her sister's hand, she also lost her sister. So both the like women lost their sisters, and now somehow they were taking care of their sister's kids. I just tweeted it out, and I get a message from my Shekhar Gupta and saying that why aren't you writing this as an article? And I wrote it down. I wrote what I saw, what I observed that day, and it became a story, and it made it to the list. I think the key to photojournalism right now, or this story, was entirely patience and nothing else. And that's what.
Okay. Now I'm just going to ask you all very quickly to tell me one thing or 2 things that you found really difficult during these assignments. Just whether it was physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. I'm going to mention one because I don't think any of you will, though you all mentioned it. They're all ladies, right? Ladies and gentlemen. The toilet, right? You're traveling, you're going by car, it's a lockdown, and there's nowhere to stay, no restaurants are not open, so it's a major problem, right? I mean, they're not like, I'm not trying to be rude, but they're not like men, right? they need a toilet. So it was very tough on them, right? Now I've mentioned the worst of it all. Quickly, Manisha, from you, the most difficult thing, quickly down the line.
I think as a photojournalist,
Or the best thing, whatever you learned, whatever.
like as a woman journalist or like washroom.
On this assignment, because then we'll come to living in Delhi very quickly.
Okay, washroom is a problem, but for me, I think the problem is clicking pictures during COVID was the problem, because I am not a journalist who just shove camera or my mic like in front on their faces, and I like to capture whatever it is like that. Right. So that was my biggest problem, because when you see a woman doing their job, it's a habit of people coming like they just come around you and like aap kyun kar rahe ho aisa, aap niklo wahan se. They are very rude, they don't talk to you politely. If you don't want it, just say no. When a woman talks to another woman, I think there is politeness, but when men comes around you while you're doing your job, they become extremely rude, and they do not they do not care that if you're working for them or it is something you're doing not for yourself. Like, right. Yeah, it is my work, I understand, but it's also my duty to put that entire thing outside on media right now.
Sonia, what was toughest or best, what you learned, something?
Apart from being taken seriously, like Manisha said, of being a woman, another thing I think I was remarkable was how during COVID, I want to focus on something good, is how people banded together to help everybody around them. Even as a community of journalists, people, when they heard that, oh, we're coming from Delhi to their state, they would help us in whatever way they could, be it food, contacts, travel, whatever. I mean, and it's not just like people just banded together, even with oxygen, right? Journalists were tweeting for people that they meet on the ground, that, you know, I may have some followers who might respond. So I think that was something that really brought people together. And I mean, of course, it took a horrible crisis to bring people together, but then I feel like that's what really
struck you.
Yeah.
Fatima.
Yeah. I feel the toughest, which actually led to one of the nicest things to come out of the assignment, was just having to keep the morals of the team high. Because I was joined by Nirmal, as I said, and it was his first job, it was first month here at the print. And he had just accompanied me, and he didn't think this was going to be a 45-day long assignment. So with struggling to find hotels, struggling to find food, and of course told that the stories would take on us, and also our driver Anilji. So all three of us, at the end of the 45 days, we were like one unit. We had these inside jokes going on. We had just this, okay, we know you like to eat this, you like to eat this. There was just this camaraderie that we'd built, but that took effort. That didn't come naturally, because it's not a switch, right? You can't just come out of a crematorium and be, okay, let me go back. It's not a road trip, but to somehow still manage to summon that energy, I think that was remarkable.
Jyoti?
I have so many anecdotes because I was all alone. I doubled up as a photographer. I provided all the photos myself. I was the videographer. I was doing everything on my own, and I spent 2 months in UP and Bihar. So as a woman, what I faced, I have never talked about it, neither on Twitter or anywhere. I haven't talked about it. The sexual harassment that I faced on the ground. During the first COVID wave, when I was covering migrant exodus, I was harassed by the migrants whose stories I went to cover in Bihar. This was in Katihar railway junction, and they were all, going to their villages. They were sent by the administration, and I faced taunts and harassment. Madam, kahan se aaye? Arey, madam. We were there for their stories. So a woman, no matter which caste, which class, which region, which state she belongs to, a woman is always perceived as a weaker section in the society. And during the second COVID wave, I will mention 2 incidents. First, I was in Barabanki. It is an adjoining district to Lucknow, and I went there to do a story on COVID, of course, hospitals. And these two guys, they were riding a scooty. They drove from Lucknow. उस scooty पे कोई number भी नहीं था. They were drunk, and they just harassed me. मेरी गाड़ी ऐसे जा रही थी, and they were like, आपकी गाड़ी भिड़ गई है. So मैंने उनसे पूछा, तो दे स्नैच्ड माई मोबाइल, दे मेरे हाथ भी मरोड़ दिया उन्होंने, एंड दे अब्यूज्ड मी लाइक एनीथिंग. एंड आई वाज, मैं गाड़ी में बैठ के सोच रही थी कि शुड आई लेट देम गो और शुड आई चेज देम. विद इन सेकेंड्स मैंने सोचा कि आज मैंने इनको छोड़ दिया ना, आगे से किसी लड़की को भी छेड़ सकते हैं. आई डिसाइडेड टू चेज देम. आई कॉल्ड ऑन 100 नंबर. पुलिस की गाड़ी आई और हमने उनको जाके पकड़ा. और पुलिस के सामने भी मुझे बोल रहे हैं, ये मैडम हमारी स्कूटी का ये कर रही थी, वो कर रही थी. एंड देन मैं उनको पकड़ के मैंने आई कॉल्ड द एसपी. आई आस्क्ड फॉर हेल्प. मैं एसएचओ के पास लेकर गई और उनको बिठाया और मैंने अपनी फाइल कंप्लेंट की. दैट टू व्हेन आई स्किप्ड माई लंच. आई वॉज फीलिंग सिक. आई वॉज कवरिंग कोविड एंड आई वॉज इन द हॉस्पिटल्स. मेरी उसके बाद मुझे 3 दिन हालत ख़राब रही, लेकिन मैंने उस केस को परस्यू किया. मैंने उनको छोड़ा नहीं. लेटर दे अपोलोजाइज्ड. ऑल्सो द SHO डिस्करेज्ड मी फॉर फाइलिंग एन FIR. दिल्ली से कहाँ होगी मैडम, चली जाओ आप, मैं आपको सच सच बता रहा हूँ. फिर जब उन्होंने अपोलोजाइज़ किया तो मैंने उनको जाने दिया. लेकिन एंड देन द सेकेंड केस इन बिहार. आई वॉज बेगूसराय से मैं अररिया जा रही थी. आई वॉज कवरिंग द स्टोरी ऑफ कोविड ऑर्फेंस. 3 बच्चों के माता पिता चले गए थे, पूरे गांव ने उनको अबेंडन कर दिया था. तो अंतिम संस्कार नहीं करके बच्चों को अपने खेतों में लाशें गाड़नी पड़ी. 3 छोटे छोटे बच्चे, उनकी स्टोरी मैं कवर करने गई. और कोविड का मैं बता दूं कि सेकेंड कोविड वेव में, क्योंकि होटल्स नहीं थे, तो सुबह खा के जाते थे, पूरे दिन आप मास्क से ढके रहते थे. बिना खाना खाए आपकी कैसी इम्यूनिटी होगी आप समझ सकते हैं. दैट डे ऑल्सो मैं गूगल पे रिलाई करके जा रही थी. एंड बाय देन आई हैड चेंज्ड 4 ड्राइवर्स. मेरे चारों ड्राइवर ने बोला ये मैडम सिर्फ शमशान घाट जा रही है, हम नहीं रह सकते. एंड द 4th ड्राइवर दैट ही वॉज विद मी, और हम गूगल मैप से गांव से जा रहे थे. ऑल ऑफ अ सडन 2 लड़के आते हैं, वो शीशे पे बैंग करते हैं. तो मुझे लगा कि मे बी वो ड्राइवर को रिकग्नाइज करते हैं, मे बी दे आर रिलेटिव्स. सो आई डिडंट आस्क. और अचानक से दे आस्क्ड फॉर हेल्प. बोला कि कहीं मर्डर हो गया है. मैंने सोचा कि मीडिया से हूँ, हो सकता है दे वांट माय हेल्प. मैंने उनको पोलाइटली बोला कि बच्चे वेट कर रहे हैं, लेट मी गो. व्हाट स्टार्टेड एज ए हेल्प बिकेम हैरेसमेंट. मॉब आ गया, बोला कि आप लोगों ने किसी का मर्डर कर दिया है, यू हैव किल्ड अ वुमन, चलो चलो चलो. उस मोमेंट पे मैं ना उस गांव का नाम जानती हूँ, ना थाने का नाम जानती हूँ. आई वॉज इन टीयर्स. उस दिन मुझे मेरे साथ लगा कि आई कुड बी सेक्शुअली हैरेस्ड एट एनी मोमेंट. और मेरे लिए वो इतना खतरनाक सीन था कि 50 आदमियों की भीड़ है और मैं लोकेट नहीं कर पा रही हूँ जगह. आई वॉज एस्कॉर्टेड बाय द पुलिस, लोकल पुलिस, after 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes were horrible, and I realized how, as a woman journalist in India, हम 40 years later earlier जो हमारी जो शैलजा या जो उस एज के जर्नलिस्ट हैं जो उन्होंने फेस किया था, the problems that women journalists face are still the same 40 years down the line. So
did you all
yes.
face some kind of harassment like this?
Yeah.
Manisha?
Always there.
Any
Some
harassment?
yeah.
You, Fatima? None.
Nothing to this extent. but
Nothing like this. Not to the extent.
but
Yeah.
Also, because we also cover gender crimes, gang rapes, और पुलिस नाकों पर होती नहीं थी, और वो इतने सुनसान सड़कें थी, और वो सारे विजुअल्स आपके दिमाग में आने लगते हैं. वो सारी स्टोरीज जो गैंग रेप की वायरल होती हैं, यू रियलाइज ऑल्सो वी हैड टू टेक लिफ्ट्स बिकॉज यू हैव टू रीच द फार फ्लंग एरियाज जहाँ मेरी वो डिज़ायर गाड़ी जा नहीं रही है. बीच में सड़क कच्ची है, नहीं जा रही, आप स्कूटी से हेल्प लेके जा रहे हो, और 4 लड़के आपको जाते हुए छेड़ रहे हैं. आप सोचते हो कि ये स्कूटी इधर रुकवा ली, आपके साथ तो कभी भी वायलेंस हो सकता है. सो ये सब चीज़ें हो रही थी, और आप किसी की हेल्प नहीं मांग सकते क्योंकि पुलिस जो है वो भी कोविड को मैनेज करने में लगी हुई थी. सो आई फेस्ड एक्सट्रीम वायलेंस ड्यूरिंग दिस असाइनमेंट. यस.
Oh dear. Okay. Aneesha, I hope your experience was not as...
I know, I'm sorry to hear about that, Jyoti. I had no idea, and it's very brave of you to share it. Just to quickly add to that, I mean, I don't think I experienced something to that extent on this assignment, but I think as journalists and also just the fact that, our numbers were everywhere because of the SOS calls. So I think, you continue to receive some unpleasant messages on your number, but you just put up a brave front and you ignored it. So I think
Your
that
key
also
takeaway? Your key takeaway?
from that would be, I think the mental health and the emotional toll that it took would be at least the toughest thing for me, very honestly, and I think for from all of us sitting on this panel. But I also feel it led to something positive coming out of it, which is acknowledging it, which is also taking some tough decisions later on in life. And in somewhat, I think on a personal front also, it was a turning point for me in a larger way. So I think I have no qualms in acknowledging that.
So let's end now with just to all of them, as I said, are not from Delhi, right? So they've all come to Delhi, they all work, and now they live here. And as you all know, Delhi is the heartbeat of the media. Everything, if you want to be a journalist, you must spend a lot of your career here. So what was it like for all of you? And when I told them before they were coming here that, I will ask you at the end what you feel about Delhi, since we're also talking about Delhi. I think I said something about how you feel about it, and Manisha immediately said, what about if I feel bad about it? I said, well, go ahead and say it. So Manisha, how bad do you feel about Delhi? And tell us.
It's been 5 years I'm staying here, but it's never home away from home. And my first bad experience started with I shifted to a hostel in Mandi House, and where I was locked during COVID for straight 5 days because they thought that I have COVID. But I didn't have COVID. I was not coughing. I didn't have fever, but I was locked inside. And then I had to write an article to get outside, to come out of my room. And it started from there, and regular harassment from my landlords and regular harassment from uncle and aunties.
Is there anything good you take away from Delhi or you like about Delhi?
Yeah, I think I like the monuments here and nothing else.
And you like to photograph them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and also momos are good here, nothing else.
Momos. Okay, good thing. Yay for Delhi. Yes, Sonia, coming from Gujuben. What? What?
So, growing up as a girl in Gujarat, you know how women are told that don't wear a certain type of clothes or don't go out at a certain time.
Yeah.
That was never ingrained in me. As a teenager, I could go back home at late in the night during Navratri, and it would be okay as long as my mother knew who I was with. So after I moved to Delhi, I had to very consciously make an effort to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So that, that the same thought process that I've grown up with doesn't land me in trouble here. Because, a cab ride at 1:30 a.m. in the night has a higher chance of getting me raped or killed here than maybe.
But has anything actually happened to you at 1:30 at night? Or any time of night? Or
actually, this actually
No, say it. No, Delhi is not that bad.
No, it actually brought back an assignment's memory since Jyoti mentioned.
Yeah.
This happened during the first lockdown, and we were in Delhi. And the rain baseras, the night shelters, were overflowing with people because people had nowhere else to go to, right? When the lockdown hit. So we went to one of the rain baseras where the Delhi government had started initiatives to feed them as well. And then there were other people coming in to help and feed people. So suddenly we are there talking to people, and then suddenly something, I don't know what went wrong, people just turned hostile. And they started chasing us with sticks.
Oh God.
And it was me and another female colleague of mine, Simran Saroo.
Yeah.
We immediately ran to the car. We told the driver, run. But it was too late. They smashed the windows of our car. The back glass, whatever, of our car was smashed in. And we were shaking. We didn't know what to do. We left the place, but we stopped a kilometer down the line because we didn't know what suddenly went wrong.
Yeah.
We were just asking them questions, and I guess they got really irked by our questions, and they're not happy with it that, two very young college-looking girls coming here and asking us questions that we don't want to answer.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Fatima.
Yeah.
Okay, something nice about Delhi? No?
Yeah, I have a very complicated relationship with the city. It's the place that gave me college and my first job and some of my closest friends, and the monuments, which I equally adore. And I really do love that city in that sense. But it's also the place where I got to witness riots firsthand that I was covering, where a mob chased me with sticks and said, "Oh, she doesn't look like a Hindu." It's also the city where for the last 6 months I've been trying to look for a house but haven't been able to get one. And the brokers are, to their credit, very honestly telling me no owner wants a Muslim, especially a Muslim from a media background. So, when stuff like that happens, usually I'm, that person, those romanticized videos on Instagram of Delhi and how beautiful Delhi is. I'm usually the one sharing those. And then stuff like this happens, it really makes me rethink my relationship with the city and its people. Because inherently it is the people that make the city, right? So I'm not sure if I love or hate the city, but I'm figuring it out.
Aneesha.
Very, very similar, actually.
I
don't think I detest it, but I think what I'll sum it up is that it's also a big form of, I think, growth for me, because I came to Delhi as an 18-year-old right from school. So college was here for me, first job. So I think that sense of independence as a woman, and I also come from a relatively traditional family and led a very sheltered life. So I think Delhi sort of has a very key role in my life in terms of coming of my own, and I think it always will. Having said that, it's also the first city where I got robbed, where I also haven't found flats because, she's a journalist and she's covering COVID. So I was running from pillar to post again during the pandemic, eventually till a nice landlord came to my rescue. So it's completely, I think, in sync with what Fatima said. It's complicated, but I still don't think I'll change much about it, because I think it has a very special place in terms of making me the person I am today, and it has its complications that come with it.
Jyoti, jaldi se.
I think I have a love and hate relationship with Delhi. I hate nasty landlords and cab cancellations, जो life की सबसे बड़ी अभी frustration मेरी यही है. और but I love Delhi. It gave me wings. I could dream in Delhi. मैं सीधे गांव से उठ के दिल्ली में आई थी, मेट्रो देखी थी, और मैंने सपने देखे और मेरे सपने पूरे हुए. मैं जर्नलिस्ट बनी अपने गांव की. So I love Delhi, but I also hate Delhi.
Okay, I think that's about it. Enough. Don't say I didn't try. But there it is. That's the verdict on Delhi. What can I say? We've run out of time. I'm sorry that we've overshot, and I'm sorry we began a little late. Thank you very much for all of your patience. Yes, 1 second. I'm coming to that. I'm just wondering your patience. If there's anyone who would now like to ask a question.
Yes.
Mike, please. Mike.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes. 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 So in 2020, Shekhar Gupta, I admire him deeply, and he gave me a chance to be in journalism. English journalism is supposed to be very elite, who's who are here, and एक गांव की लड़की को मौका दिया. So I always feel grateful for the opportunity that he gave me. और 2020 में उन्होंने एक मेल भेजा था हम सब जर्नलिस्ट को. That mail has stayed with me. और उस मेल में उन्होंने लिखा था, और मुझे इतनी बड़ी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी फील हुई उस मेल से. उसका कंटेंट इस तरह से था कि हम अपनी भारत की जनता के साथ एक बड़ा सोशल कनेक्ट है हमारा उन लोगों से. आप राइट्स में भी जाओगे तो भी वो आपसे बोलेंगे कि चाय पी लो, पानी पी लो. किसी का पति मरा हुआ है, वो बोलेगी आप पानी पी के क्यों नहीं जा रहे. वो जिस तरह का हमें जितनी इज्जत हमें भारत के लोगों से मिलती है, तो हमारी उतनी ही बड़ी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि ये जो इंडिया की हिस्ट्री में जो इतने बड़े क्राइसिस आए हैं, हेल्थ इमरजेंसी, यू हैव टू बी देयर, यू हैव टू फुलफिल दैट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. और उस मेल के बाद से आई वॉज फियरलेस. फर्स्ट और सेकेंड कोविड वेव में तो आई वॉज नॉट इवन वैक्सीनेटेड, और मुझे कोविड भी नहीं हुआ था कि एंटीबॉडीज़ हैं दैट आई कैन हिट ऑन द ग्राउंड और मैं कर लूँ. बट आई वॉज सो फियरलेस कि मुझे करना है, क्योंकि आई हैव अ रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी टूवर्ड्स माई पीपल, एंड दैट कीप्स मी गोइंग डिस्पाइट एवरीथिंग.
What about all of you? What motivated all of you?
Go ahead.
Bolo.
I think it was a simple will to just go out there and tell people stories.
Yeah, you were just kicked out of the office and told you have to go.
But it is the burden of the opportunity. I will say this. I know a lot of journalists and other organizations who were like, okay, I wish we got this opportunity. So it is that sense of, okay, I'm so privileged to be out there when no one is on the streets. My car is being allowed because I have this media pass, and that does give you such enormous burden. Of course, it is the passion of job and storytelling and love for journalism and all those things, but it is also just this sense of duty that I think just strikes in moments like these, especially.
I want to add, listen Fatima, just because we had the press card, इसलिए लोग जाने दे रहे थे, ऐसा नहीं था. That's when we were crossing into Rajasthan, every single district checkpost stopped us. We had to make calls right up to the chief minister's office, down to the whatever toll lines were there, कि हमें cross करने दो, हम राजस्थान में नहीं रुकने वाले हैं, हमें गुजरात जाना है.
I think at the time, and we know that all of us, that it was the story of our lives. There wasn't going to be another story like this. Just as the pandemic, I hope, never happens to any of you again or us, but it was also for a journalist, it was the story of a lifetime. Okay, anyone else have a question? You do? Oh, wonderful, please. Good evening.
To now like 2 million subscribers.
Wonderful.
The print have. So I have a question to Jyoti ma'am. During the second wave, we saw a lot of dead bodies washing up on the shores of Ganga, and I want to. The main question goes to like, what is the average psyche of a average UP voter? Even the last year, they won a landslide victory in Uttar Pradesh. So even after the news coverage, they showed that so many dead bodies are happening over all of the Uttar Pradesh, and how the government mismanaged the COVID crisis. So what do you think about this? Like, how they won that election?
कोविड मिसमैनेजमेंट के बाद यूपी का इलेक्शन उन्होंने कैसे जीत लिया? आई थिंक समटाइम्स हम जो स्टोरीज़ को समझते हैं इलेक्शन में, क्योंकि हम ऐसा समझते हैं कि हम भारत को बहुत समझते हैं, इलेक्शंस को भी बहुत समझते हैं, ये बहुत ही पर्सनल ट्रेजेडीज़ में ही रह गया. कोविड का जो स्टोरी था पॉलिटिकल में नहीं बदल पाया. और ऑल्सो क्योंकि जब कोविड हो रहा था तो लोग पब्लिक रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स जो थे वो सारे अपने एमएलएज एमपी अपने अपने घरों में थे और कोई किसी की हेल्प के लिए आ नहीं रहा था. सो द पब्लिक वाज ऑन इट्स ओन, और आई थिंक इसलिए वो उसका पर्सनल ट्रेजेडी बन गया, ये कलेक्टिवली नहीं बनाया. इवन इफ़ वी गो नाउ आफ्टर ईयर और 2, कोविड का जिक्र उतना आता नहीं है. लोग बहुत ही अब हो गए कि अच्छा वो तब हुआ था, अभी वो कुछ दूर की मेमोरी की तरह हो गया. I think.
If I may, I'd like to add to this, if you don't mind. I think it's also because, it was a global phenomenon, right? It wasn't just UP or Bihar or Delhi or India. It happened everywhere, and we saw everywhere the similar kind of stories, hospitals overflowing with people, graveyards, etc. So I think to that extent, the average person, we all had personal tragedies, as she said, and we didn't think that one government was responsible for it. It was a much larger thing than just one government anywhere. Okay, I think because we have another very special session for you after this, so I don't want to take up any more time. I want to thank you all very much once again for your patience and for being here with us. And as I want to thank all of these young people with us, let's give them a hand.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.